This is our second class on Vayireu Elokei Yisroel, and the discussion that we're having, which we started last week at the end of the class, and we will now continue, is about this concept of Adam Ha'elyin. Adam Ha'elyin. In English, the supernal man, the man above. And of course, when you talk about Adam Ha'elyin, the ceiling which is above Adam Ha'elyin would be called Meod Ha'elyin, which is the supernal infinity, and the floor which would be beneath Adam Ha'elyin, which is called in the Tanya Adam Ha'tachtin, the lower man. So Adam Ha'elyin is sort of, if you want to intellectually categorize it, and when you categorize things, especially abstract things in philosophy, you do it often indirectly by knowing what it is not. So Adam Ha'elyin is lower than Meod Ha'elyin, and it is above Adam Ha'tachtin. We have been learning these classes now for approximately 7 years, Baruch Hashem, and we've covered a considerable number of Maamorim in the Torah and Torah Or. I cannot say that we're anywhere near the end, but we've learned a considerable number of Maamorim over the years, Baruch Hashem. And there are themes, there are ideas which repeat themselves frequently in these classes. And one of those, without a doubt, is this inyan of Adam Ha'elyin. The cliche way in which I say this, in other words, this is my own thought, but I think it's a legitimate way to put it. If you take Adam Ha'elyin out of Kabbalah, there is no real difference between Kabbalah and Chassidishe. Jewish mysticism and Jewish philosophy are separated by many things, but in terms of form, the difference is Adam. All of Kabbalah, really, to a very, very great extent, comes down to the concept of Adam. There is another concept which is called Ein Sof, which I'm not including in this conversation, but to a very great extent, at least, Kabbalah revolves around the idea of Adam. The difference between Kabbalah and non-Kabbalistic theology and understanding the relation between the Eibishter and the world, and the question of Midas and the question of Pshitos, is Atzilus. The non-Kabbalists speak about Hashem having only a nifal. The Kabbalists speak about Hashem also having the Pa'ula, and that's the meaning from Atzilus, Adam. And as I said, over the years we've visited this idea of Adam on many occasions, and I guess we could say that to some extent at least we've approached it from different angles on each different occasion. So let me repeat again, or enlighten what Adam means. I am not necessarily saying something which I have not said in the past, and I'll say it in a way that will segue, that will lead us into how the word Adam is used in this particular Maamar. Adam is infinity, but Adam is infinity in form. Meod, which is the equal and opposite of Adam, is infinity, but Meod is infinity in formlessness. In other words, Meod Ha'elyin, which is called Ein Sof, which is also a Kabbalistic idea which does not exist in non-mystical Jewish theology, in Chassidishe, in Jewish philosophy, is about Ein Sof. Ein Sof means the so-called light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is infinite and plain and one. And the equal and opposite of Adam Ha'elyin, its infinite, plain unity is, the equal and opposite of Meod Ha'elyin, which is infinite and plain and unified, is Adam, which is also infinite but complex and diverse. Of course, the idea of an infinity of finite aspects is very, very difficult to fathom, or perhaps impossible to fathom. The concept is that Adam is complicated, made up of many, many parts, but made up of parts that are very, very, very healthy. Using the physical analogy of cells, a human body is made up of many, many, many cells. Each living creation, complex organism, is made up of many cells. And of course, it's discussed in biology even, why it is important to have more smaller cells than have fewer larger cells, because of surface area and so on. And in the Nimshal, in Kabbalah, this is also true, but for a bit of a different reason. In Kabbalah also we speak about aspects and smaller and smaller and smaller parts. But in Kabbalah it's called Harchava, the broadening of the spheres, where 10 becomes 100, becomes 1,000, becomes 10,000, and so on. Because the more detailed, the more broken down the big aspects are into smaller and smaller components, the more precise will be the match between the Ruach and the Geshem, and the material and the spiritual in Atzilus, in other words, between the light and the vessel, because they're more precisely matched. So in Kabbalah, we also talk about many, many details. There's 10 spheres, times 10, times 10, times 10. And as a result of this, there's a very, very complex Adam that, like cells, have two basic requirements. Requirement number one is that each cell has to be entirely self-contained, with an envelope, with a wall that separates it from its environment, that's healthy, that doesn't leak and has enough energy, and so on and so forth. And on the other hand, the health of a cell depends on its healthy aligning itself with the cells nearest it, and ultimately with the entire organism, with the entire living being. And this is true mystically as well. In Sfiris, Adam is complex. Basically, he's made up of 10. Or as I explained it to you last week, it's 9, 3 across and 3 from top down. 9 becomes the ideal metaphor for the complex order that adds up to infinity, because you have the poles, right, left, and a center. You have the extremes, top, middle, and a bottom. And of course, bringing together opposites requires a depth, requires an integrity. And that's what this comes down to, that there's a certain integrity, there's a certain emes, which allows for opposites to cohabit, to be fused together into a oneness. But it's not a oneness that dissolves or dilutes or diminishes their disparateness. To the contrary, it incorporates it. It's the extreme chesed and the extreme gevura joined together through teferes to create an adam, a mensch. And the same is true, reish techseif, a mind and a heart and an ability to function in the real world are not just compromised in their union, but they're mutually enhanced through the union. The mind is better because of the feet is of course better because of the head, and so on. And ultimately we see Adam as a complexity of infinity, because there's so many layers. And the deeper you go, the more split up, the more diverse, the more individual details there are. And on each level and at each layer of depth, they have the same two principles. Each individual kli has to be healthy into itself and has to join with the other kelim in a healthy way, which is called the hiskalus, ultimately adding up to a one. So Kabbalah argues that Adam and Meod are inverse images of the same thing. Meod is an expression of the Eibishter's Ein Seif. Adam is an expression of the Eibishter's Ein Seif. But Adam is an expression of the Eibishter's Ein Seif in a form, in a finite framework. But in that finite framework, primarily because of the interconnectedness of components, in other words, even if the number of parts are finite, the number of relationships adds up to an Ein Seif, making Adam infinite, just like Meod is infinite, except that in Meod the infinity is a plain, simple, transcendent one, and in Adam it's a complex, integrated, orderly, manifest one, if you will. So Meod and Adam are equal and opposite. These two ideas basically are the building blocks, they're the bedrock of Chochmas HaKabbalah, understanding Ein Seif and understanding Adam. Changes everything about Jewish theology and even Jewish practice if you live your life based on the teachings of Pnimis HaTorah, of Kabbalah, of Seid, and at the core of it lies these ideas and how it connects to doing mitzvahs, L'Shem Yichud Kodesh B'Rich Shchinte, and so on and so forth. Our Maamar introduces us to the idea of Adam for a very different reason. In other words, what I've said so far is I've presented Meod and Adam as being two inverse, two opposite forms of the same Ein Seif, for the purposes of Ein Seif. In other words, Kabbalah is about godliness. Kabbalah is a layer of Torah. It's a dimension of Torah. Torah has a variety of dimensions. One of those layers, one of the deepest layers, is Seid, is Kabbalah. Kabbalah, using these two basic building blocks, and of course, The word basic is very apropos because it's far more than two. Within these two ideas, there are many lesser ideas, and it's of course it's a whole world. It's very complicated. But these basic two ideas are portraying the mystical appreciation of what is behind the creation and ultimately behind creation's purpose, which is Ein Sof, godliness, and the manifestation of godliness into the Madrega of Adam, which is called Yichud Kodesh Baruch Hu Shchinte. But there's more. And the more, of course, is that once you have a notion of a lakus in the framework of Adam, there can be a relationship between Adam Ha'elyon and Adam HaTachton. A relationship between the supernal man, which is Ein Sof in the framework of Adam, which is basically called Atzilus, and Adam HaTachton, a human being down here on this earth. And if I may say so, and it's conceivable that I'm not allowed to say so, but I'm going to say it anyway, and if I'm wrong, Hashem Atev Yechaper, this is really where you're crossing over from Kabbalah to Chassidus. In the world of Kabbalah, we live down here on this earth to affect change l'mayla in Atzilus. L'shem yichud kodesh baruch hu shchinte. Kabbalists, even as they exist as physical beings, neshamas begufim, are learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, and their entire endeavor is to affect Atzilus. For Atzilus to be enhanced, to add additional light, to create additional unions, to enhance the order, and so on. Chassidus, on the other hand, is not about Atzilus. Chassidus is about Asiyah, about this world, and about Tachtonim, and Asidira b'Tachtonim, and so on. And therefore, the idea of a relationship between Adam Ha'elyon and Adam HaTachton are very, very important. In other words, the relationship between Adam HaTachton and Adam Ha'elyon is not only how Adam HaTachton touches Adam Ha'elyon through his avodah, but how Adam HaTachton brings down Adam Ha'elyon to Adam HaTachton through his avodah. And the idea, of course, is that Kvayachal, once Elokus, once Hashemliness, has allowed itself to take on the form of Adam, it now has a relationship with anything else which is Adam. We all understand that Atzilus, Adam Ha'elyon, is Elokus. It's eternal, it's perfect. It doesn't die because it is no inexactitude. And of course, below Adam Ha'elyon, there are a variety of Adams which represent Klipa, that do have an union of Misa because there's an element of inexactitude and preciseness, a lack of tikkun and birur. There's nitzutze kedusha that are floating around in their wrong places, that if they're not corrected are destructive. Until you get to Asiyah, which is Kabbalistically Rubik HaKul. It's the word which is most corrupted by untikkund aspects of Kedusha, and of course the Avodah Vayidus, Avodah Sabirurim, to organize and to rearrange and to create tikkun even in Asiyah, just like there is tikkun in Atzilus. But on a very simple level, Kvayachal, Hashem is an Adam, and in as much as Hashem is an Adam, we relate to him as Adam HaTachton relating to Adam Ha'elyon, the man below interacting with the man above. And the argument is, the philosophy is, the mysticism is, that in as much as Elokus descends to the level of Adam, we have a relationship with Adam. We can affect Atzilus, we can change Atzilus, we can touch Atzilus, because we're in the image of Atzilus, we're like Atzilus. In other words, in as much as a human being is an Adam, is a human being, he cannot relate to the Ein Sof, which we're calling Meod, because he's finite and complex and orderly and logical and limited and midas oriented and so on. But to Adam Ha'elyon, to Atzilus, he absolutely has a relationship, because this is Adam, like a relationship between a big person and a small person, in Kabbalistic terms, like the Moshe, around the Chassidus, or the Maras HaGedelos, the Maras HaKtanos, for Ak and Atzilus, and Atzilus and Asiyah. So, our Maamar is also going to discuss the idea of Adam, but it's not going to be discussing Adam so much in the context of the Meod, which is above it, but much more in the context of the Adam, which is beneath it. That once Elokus, once godliness allows itself to take on the tziyur of Adam, which is infinity in a complex order, it has a relationship. Adam Ha'elyon has a relationship with Adam HaTachton, with what's happening down here in this world and the people and so on and so forth. Now, parenthetically, what I'm about to say is not relevant to our Maamar and may distract you, but I will say it nevertheless. When we learn Chassidus, about a Yiddish neshama, about what a Jew is, one of the ideas that we learn is that a Jew has in himself Meod Ha'elyon as well. The idea that a Jew has a power of Mesiras Nefesh, of self-sacrifice and transcendence of his mind and his heart, is also part of our psyche. And the way Chassidus would explain it is that the Adam HaTachton touches and affects and can be affected by the Adam Ha'elyon, And the Meod HaTachton touches and affects and can be affected by the Meod HaElyon. When you serve Hashem in a finite way, that means you're functioning through your Adam, through your humanhood, and you touch the Adam Elyon, the supernal humanhood, so to speak. But when you reach deep inside yourself and you access the infinity within the person, so you have a relationship with Meod HaElyon, which is the concept of Mesiras Nefesh, and the way we understand Aseres Yemei Tshuva, where there's a Gili of Yigim Midas Arachmim, Kirev HaMoed HaLanitzitz, and so on and so forth. Ad Kan Maamar Amuzke. This is the end of the parenthesis. Now let's get back to the Maamar. Our Maamar is talking about Atzilus as Adam, with the understanding that it's really Ein Seif, taking on an inverse form of Adam. It's just as infinite as it was when it was Pashat and Echad. But now it's his Chalkus and his Galus. It's complex and integrated. But the Rebbe will explain how once Elokus manifests into a tziyud of Adam, it comes down to a level of Adam, it can then come down and affect the Adam HaTachton. So the Rebbe says on line 20, Ach mikol mokem. It must be stated that ha'ora zui b'chin ein seif eposh u'b'tachas apshitos. That means that before Ein Seif, before Meod comes down into Adam, as Ein Seif expresses the infinity and the unity and the plainness of godliness, it is simple and transcendent and has no relationship with the lower worlds, and the lower worlds have no relationship with it. Therefore, there needs to be a creation of worlds, which is step one. And once there's a relationship of worlds, needs to be a relationship between those worlds and their creator. So in order to affect the creation of the worlds and the subsequent relationship which will follow, that she is have a man to create from her, from pshitas of ein seif bechinas elemes begvolum the worlds that are measured, limited, and measured. In addition to bechinas chalkus hamadreges, they are complex and subdivided, diverse, and various levels of world, says the Alter Rebbe, line 22 now, it's how Ein Sof comes down to the form of Adam. Godliness takes on the form of Adam. The Hainu, in other words, is the light descends into vessels. The light by itself is plain. The vessels are the complexity and the order and the integration of Adam, which is the inverse idea of Meod, and there is a notion of the Pashat, the light which is by itself Ein Seif, descending and fusing and becoming one with the complex order of the vessels and expressing themselves through those vessels, at which point they become complex and Adam. And that's the descent of Ein Sof into Atzilus. Continues the Rebbe and he says on line 24, this Adam, which is Atzilus, is the collective of Jewish souls. As the pasuk says, Atem, Adam, the Jewish people are called Adam, ki Yisrael olav machshava yidna part of the Eibishter's thought. And in this particular case, Yidna, the Eibishter's thought, goes on Atzilus. Now, first of all, classically, when we talk about Yiddish and Neshamas, we call them Knesset Yisrael, and Knesset Yisrael is connected only to Malchus of Atzilus. Here he's saying that Neshamas Yisrael, the collective of Jewish souls, is not connected only to Malchus of Atzilus, but to all of Atzilus, which is connected to the concept of Kol Nishmosav and Nishmosav Akaima B'Diyuk No'ah, Kabei Malka Kaddish, which is a Lashon HaZohar, I believe, that we're talking not about Malchus of Atzilus, but the Diyuk and the countenance of all of Atzilus. So he's saying that Neshamas Yisrael are Atzilus, the way Neshamas Yisrael exist in their source. Not as the souls are down here, not even as the souls are in Malchus of Atzilus, which is called Knesset Yisrael, but as the souls are in the Madreg of Zod Atzilus, they are Atzilus. They're the Kalim of Atzilus, which of course is consistent with how our Maamar began. Vayireu was Elokei Yisroel. Elokei Yisroel means how Elokus is Yisroel. Elokus is godliness, Yisroel is Adam. The collective of Jewish souls is in the complex, integrated order of Adam. So Elokei Yisroel means how Atzilus is representative of Yisroel. Another Maamar will tell you, Zeis HaTeira Adam, that Atzilus is Teira. A third Maamar will tell you that Atzilus is something else, but in this Maamar, Yisroel, the collective of Jewish souls, as they exist in their root of roots, in their source of sources, in Zav Atzilus, they are the Kalim of Atzilus, in which the Ein Sof manifests to create the framework of Adam. Uksiv, and it says in the Pasuk, I'm now on line 26, that God Almighty says, I'm going to rest in them. Now, of course, we know this Pasuk of V'shachanti b'seicham as an allusion to our world. V'asuli mikdash, they should make for me a sanctuary as a reference to Asiyah, not to Atzilus. V'shachanti b'seicham, and godliness will manifest in Atzilus once that sanctuary has been created by us through our avodah. But the Alter Rebbe says it applies to Atzilus as well. That there's a sanctuary which is created by the existence of Jewish souls, naturally. And the Shechina, the Ein Sof, rests in them. It's not resting in him, but in them. Sheheim, because the Neshamas Yisrael is collective, as they are in Zav Atzilus. Our Kelim, Lashras, Shechinasa Yizbarach, are vessels for the manifesting of the Eibishter's Shechina. And the collective of Jewish souls in Atzilus become the vessels which bring forward the Ein Sof from its transcendent, from its removed Meod state to its manifest and available and revealed Adam state. Okay, it is known to Tachas Habriya, the reason for creation, ultimately the purpose is that the Ein Sof should manifest not only in Atzilus, but in his Asiyah as well, than here in this world. This means that the Shechina should sit on the collective of Jewish souls down here in this world, in Asiyah. That's also included in this midrashic statement. If the Jewish people enter into the Eibishter's thought. So on the previous page, on line 24, Yisroel Machshava meant Atzilus. Now on line 28, Yisroel Machshava means Asiyah, because the Eibishter's thought includes both. That there should be a manifestation of godliness in Adam, as it is Lamaila, called Atzilus, which is also the collective of Neshamas Yisrael. And then it should be Nimshach also Lamata, V'shachanti b'seicham, and Neshamas Yisrael Lamata. V'zeu, that's the meaning of Machin, a prepared edifice, L'shiftecha, for the Eibishter seating, Paltiel Hashem, the Eibishter created. And this is, of course, in Atzilus, which goes on the Neshamas Yisrael, which are the seats for the manifestation of Ein Sof. So he continues, and I'm going to use a form which may be a bit of a simplification, but it will certainly help us. And we're going to say this. The Alter Rebbe is describing two ideas. The first idea is that Ein Sof should manifest in the Kelim of Atzilus. And the second idea is that the Ein Sof should manifest in us, in the Kelim of Asiyah. So in the next paragraph, he's going to talk about Neshama and Guf, soul and body. So let us say, for the sake of our conversation, that soul is Atzilus and body is Asiyah, even though it's more complicated than that. So the Rebbe says on line 30 of Achshav, nowadays, Hashra Azu, this manifesting is Rashmi Neshamas Yisrael, is only on Jewish souls. And let's assume that this means Atzilus. V'lei begufim shall have not on the bodies of the Jewish people. Mepnei sheba nocha shal chava v'hital bazuam, but the serpent, Ba, came on Chava and put into her Zuama, filth. The way to explain this mystically can be corroborated by biology also. And that is, there is a Rabbeinu Bechaya, which I've talked about in the past, which I love to share, who makes the argument, Rabbeinu Bechaya lived hundreds of years ago, that you can argue that, in theory at least, biologically speaking, it's possible for a complex organism to live forever. A human being could live forever. He's talking about the question of Gan Eden, of living forever in a physical body. And he argues that it's arguable that it's logical that a physical body could live forever. Why? Because of regeneration, which he calls Ke'ech Hamar. The body renews itself. Regeneration. There's new cells, and new cells, and new cells. Of course, in the human experience and in the animal experience, the cells age. In other words, the cells that we develop later in life are not as robust as the cells we created earlier in life. But just for the sake of hypothesis, what were to happen if they would not age? No matter how old we get, the cells that a body produces are as viable and as vibrant and as leak-free and as energy efficient and productive as the cells we had in our youth, so we wouldn't age. But then, of course, there's the other factor that there are what's called free radicals, right? Electrons that bounce around, that dislodge parts of atoms and create disorder, which ultimately brings to death. And this is the biological way of describing Adam and Chava were perfect. They're supposed to live forever as physical specimens, physical creations, because they were the physical presence of Atzilus. They were Atzilus down here. And inasmuch as they were Atzilus, they were physical bodies made up of many parts, complex, but their integration and their harmony was absolute, which made them infinite, even though they were finite. But the sin brought Zuhama, a tiny measure of disorder. like a free radical, an electron that doesn't have a place within the body. And that Zuhama is the beginning of death. Like it says in Avinu B'chayim, Mishanil Maschalas Yabish, death begins at the moment of birth, because we were created, when we're born inexact. We're born compromised. So the Rebbe therefore says, the idea that godliness can be manifest in our bodies, which is, I'm explaining it to you, means, as we exist in this physical world, cannot happen now, because godliness can only manifest if our bodies are healthy and whole, and are eternal, are going to live forever, are proper seats for Ein Sof. And since the original sin, it's no longer the case. Says the Rebbe, don't we know that it says in the Gemara, it says in the Zayah, the Eibusha gave us the Torah. It says Chedus, al tikir Chedus el Choros, al tikir Choros el Chedus. Chedus mimalach hamoves, the Jewish people, once they received the Torah at Mount Sinai, reverted back to the state of Adam and Chava before the original sin. Namely, their bodies were perfect and theoretically could have existed forever. So the Rebbe answers his question, but then they sinned with the golden calf. Ushara, Venus, and the sins that came later, Chazra Hazuma. The inexactitude, the imprecision, the death element was added to their biological system, and they became mortal. They're going to die. As far as their body is concerned, Shaguf Nifra, Nikra Mishcha Dechivi. It's called the embodiment of the snake. The snake represents death, and their bodies are the skin of the snake. They carry a little bit of that death element inside of themselves, and therefore they deteriorate, they die, they don't live forever. Therefore, says the Rebbe, the idea that the Neshamas Yisrael are this Adam, that the Jewish collective are the Adam that we're describing, cannot be in Asiya, can't be down here, can't be in our bodies, because our bodies are not appropriate and ideal seats for the sitting of the Ein Sof. On the other hand, Avalei b'nishmasam, the soul is perfect, even after the original sin, because by Matan Torah it was corrected, and it was never uncorrected by the subsequent Avedas. The Jewish souls are a piece of Hashem Mamish. In other words, they're Ein Sof and they're perfect. Like it says in Kisvi Arizal, the soul is ABT, already been taken, it's already been perfected. It's called Bira Rishain Malmala Lamata. And because Neshamas Yisrael are absolutely perfect, Ein Sof already manifests on them, and this is the world of Atzilus. And he concludes, said, when Mashiach comes, the bodies will also be refined, and he brings two rayas. Hashem is going to perfect our bones. Hashem is going to remove the spiritual uncleanness from the world. And then there'll be a possibility for the revelation of Kfei Davai, the glory of Avaya, in a way that Viráu kol basar, that the flesh, that the meat will also be able to see. The body, the form, will be purified. There will be a revelation of godliness, gam b'gufim, in the bodies as well. As opposed to right now, the revelations only in the souls and not in the bodies. And again, I'm using my own words now. That means the Adam Ha'elyon, which is Atzilus, is currently a seat for the Ein Sof. The Adam HaTacht, which is the goof of the Jewish people, is not yet a seat for the Ein Sof. It will be so when Mashiach comes. V'hinei, line 39. B'chinas gili alakus b'neshamas Yisrael. We just described the idea that there is Ein Sof, there is godliness, which we're calling Meod, which must be manifest in Adam, which is an inverse arrangement of the Ein Sof in a complex order to bring godliness down. That's called Adam. In Atzilus it's called Adam Ha'elyon, and it's represented by the collective of Neshamas Yisrael. Says the Rebbe, Gila Lakus b'Neshamas Yisrael, when godliness comes down into the Jewish souls in Atzilus, Hine hu nimshach betzir Adam, it takes on that form. The collective of Jewish souls is complex, and the Ein Sof, which manifests in that collective, is also complicated as a consequence. To put it in a little bit more explained words, this is what says in Kabbalah, that Adam Berishin is one man, Adam and Chava, they're collectively one man, and they represent all the souls that will ever exist. So it says in the Tzemach Tzedek's Maamar of Avos Yisrael, which is based on the Zayir, I suppose, that they're ka'anvin detalien be'itkele, k'tzasam dat n'tluyim bereishe, k'tzasam n'tluyim bezreye, and so on, which means the collective of Jewish souls hang from the body of Adam and Chava like clusters of grapes, like grapes from clusters. Some are hanging from their heads, some are hanging from their arms, some are hanging from their legs, and so on. In other words, the collective Adam is, in a very big way, 9 spheres. That's all it is. Right, left, center, top, middle, bottom. But it's multiplied and complicated until you reach a degree of complexity which numbers 600,000, or many times more than that, 600,000 times 600,000, which in the metaphor, in the mashal, would be like individual cells of the various different limbs and organs of the body. So the Rebbe says the idea that a lakus comes down into Tzir Adam is not only in general, like into 10 spheres, but specifically into the 248 limbs or organs, which correspond to the 248 mitzvahs, and then of course much, much more detail which exists within those details. V'zehu Adam Atam, which is why Neshamas Yisrael are collectively called Adam, in the image of God. Pirish Adarach Mashal, for example. There is Mishkan HaNeshama Pratiyas Beivri Aguf. There's the sitting of the soul in the individual limbs of a body. The Neshama is one, like godliness is one. And yet when it manifests into the body, it becomes complex. Tayag minikeches v'chayes klulis babakeach. And every piece of the body gets a different life. Shugam kim b'tzir Adam, because the physical body also is in the other model, meaning to say complex, orderly, and theoretically infinite. K'mei, for example, when you're talking about the human body, the intellectual light finds its seat in the mind. And the passions of the heart find their seat in the heart. And the expression of those emotions, in other words, as those emotions translate into deed, biyadayim in the arms, chesed is the right hand, gvur is the left hand, and so on. And as a consequence, the one soul is diversified and made complex based on the complexity and the diversity of the limbs and organs of the body. And it breaks down into details. The 248 individual limbs, that the soul's light is distributed and divided up at each one of them. And then he says what I told you in the beginning, with derech klal nechlakim, in general they're divided legimel kaven, to the 3 poles, Dereya Yamino, small, the right arm, the left arm, and Aguf Ba'emtza, the body in the middle, the center, the Tiferes. But just as the complexity is very diverse, and ultimately it's like an infinite number of parts or an infinite number of unions. But at its base, it's a right, left, and a center. It's also a top and a middle and a bottom. And this becomes the issue which the Rebbe will now begin exploring. In other words, he's trying to describe complex order and make the case and argue that in Kabbalistic terms, on a Kabbalistic level, in a perfect world, in a living system, complex order can add up to infinity, which means that a living thing, which is made up of many parts, could theoretically live forever. So in general it's 3, more specifically it's 248, and even more specifically it's much, much more. But the complexity is not only lateral, that means not only across, right, left, center, but it's also vertical, from top to the bottom. And this is the next point. I'm on line 45. V'hine. Pardon me. Just like what we just described in the human body is a complex division of components that share the soul as it manifests in each one in a distinctive way. And all together they join into a collective, into an achdus. The same is true in the idea of Ein Seif manifesting in the Kelim of Atzilas ben Neshamas Yisrael, as they're in Atzilas. As the Pasuk says, Neda Basharim Baila, that the husband is known Basharim in the gates. And it's translated in Zeir B'chol Chad, in each individual aspect, L'fum Madam Eshar B'libe, based on the measure of its heart. So there's one husband, which is the Ein Seif, and there's Sha'arim, there's innumerable gates through which the Baal becomes available to the various aspects of what is the wife, in effect, the collective recipient of what the Baal is, because every part of the organism is distinct and gets life in a different way. Just like it's true that some souls are on the right and some souls are on the left and some souls are on the center, it's also true some souls are on the top, the mind, which is the vessel for Teira and Rashi Alpha Yisrael, which of course is Kabbalistically the souls of the greatest neshamas. There are those souls that are the vessels and the seat for the emotions as they exist on the level of Ein Seif. V'yesh neshama shem bechinas regel. Are the souls at the level of the feet. Though there is a diversity, some are higher, some are lower, some are to the right, some are to the left, they're all part of Neda Basharim. That there's one Ein Seif that becomes available in the incredible variety of different measures that represent the various aspects of the various different Kalim. Pirush Neda, the meaning of the word Neda, which means literally known, is Lashon Chiba Vizkashos. Neda, the bond, the connecting to the Baal is through Shiyorim. Kedim Yin Chibur Vizkashos Hanashama Beguf, like, for example, the joining of a soul and the body. Shemayez Shaneshama Hi Ruchnius, notwithstanding the soul by itself is spiritual. Ulamayla Megeder Guf Gashmin, above the category of a physical body. Afapikain, still by Hashem's design, he miskasheres, it's tied. Umislabeshes, and it's manifest Beguf Gashmin, a physical body, by a special power which is called Keach HaMafli Lasis, the joy Ruchnius and Gashmius. Similarly, there's a special Keach Elokei which joins together Oyer, which is Ein Seif and Pshitos, and Keli, which is Gevul and Agabol and Eschalkas and Eskalos. And each light goes in a different aspect of that collective. Kmeikain continues the Rebbe on line 53. The same is true. Lamayal Nimshach Gilead and Seif Baruch. There is the bringing down, the drawing down, the manifesting of Ein Seif, which is Shalmai Lemechinas Chachmo Midas, which is above the world of the Spheres. Liyith Shade Umislabish Ben Neshama Yisroel, to rest and to be manifest in the collective of Jewish souls, which is the Sheklalus on Hibechinas came as Adam, that all of them together represent Adam, Elyon, all of them together represent the complete composite, right, left, center, top, middle, bottom, of what is Adam, and all of Ein Seif manifests in them. Although, when you talk about a collective of Jewish souls, and argue that each one of the individual souls within that collective contribute to the greater whole, and they're all interconnected and interdependent and need each other. Notwithstanding that some represent the highest aspects and others represent the lowest aspects, still they're all necessary. And even those souls, those vessels, those kelim, that are representative of Bechinas Negel, Bechinas Akfayim, the level of the foot and the level of the heel, they're also part of this collective. Moreover, Yesh Behen Maila, in some aspects the foot is even not only necessary, but has advantages, is advantageous even over the head and the heart. The legs make the body stand. So they move, they make the body mobile. From place to place. The head without a feet can't stand. The head without a feet cannot walk. Which is the Kabbalistic explanation for the Mishnah, which is explained by Riechis and Tanya Perek Lamed. One should be humble in the presence of all other men, all other human beings. So in Tanya, the argument is you should be humble in the presence of every other person, because every human being is better than all other human beings, at least in one way. But here it's not about being better, it's simply being dependent. And in certain aspects, the foot is dependent, the head is dependent upon the foot, and in those things, the foot is superior to the head. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a foot. V'zehu, which brings us back to the pasuk with which this conversation began. Shenem arbei yizbarach. When you write about Hashem, and of course you don't mean Hashem, you mean Hashemliness. Kemara Adam b'chaf Adim, in the likeness of Adam, of man, with a chaf, which makes it only similar to, but not identical with Adam. So the Rebbe says, why it says Kemara Adam? And you should know the sichas of the Rebbe, where the Rebbe explains this in a variety of different ways. In my Maamar Chassidishe, I told this to you last week, there's 3 levels. There's Adam, Mara Adam, and the Musk Mara Adam. And they're all in Atzilus. And the Rebbe here doesn't make those distinctions, so we won't make those distinctions, but there's a Madrega in Atzilus, which is not Mara Adam, but the Musk Mara Adam, but Adam Mamish, but it's not for us. Ein kan amokim l'harach bazeh. Ki be'emes, because to be sure, lav mikol in and midas yu klal. When you're talking about Ein Seif, he has no connection to any midah. Ein Seif is pashut. Ein Seif is echad. U'kamei shekasav, as the pasuk says, ki lei adam hu geimer Hashem is ultimately, Ein Seif is ultimately not an adam. However, shayered u'mislabish ben neshama Yisroel, it descends and manifests, reveals itself in the collective of Jewish souls. Shei bechinas tir adam, which we call Atzilus, the supernal man. Imkain, and as a consequence, mitzad his slap shazu, in as much as it manifests into Atzilus, it is called Kemara Adam V'Gemer. But ideally, it's above that, it's Ein Seif. And that's why it says Kemara Adam with a Chaf Adimin. V'zeu mashakasa, which is also the explanation of the pasuk and the medish that goes with it, Vasisem atem v'omer azal kilu asun. This the katav latkana raza b'shmei, which we've had in Maamar actually pretty recently, that the Yid is in a position to strengthen the kelim of Atzilus and bring down more Ein Sof. So this, which we started, say, on line 20, is a very brief and I think quite concise, clear description of the interface between Meod and Adam, between Ein Sof and Atzilus, and to a lesser degree between Adam Ha'elyon and Adam Ha'tacht. Now, line 63 has a keseres, where kisei. I wrote that word myself, of course. In the Maamar, we don't have these titles. I put them in to give the Maamar more structure, easier for us to learn. What are we going to say now? That it's not enough for Me'od to come down into Adam. That means for Ein Sof to come down into Atzilus. Adam has to come into Adam Ha'tacht. That means Atzilus has to come into the lower worlds. Now I want to say this again. This was touched on last week. I want to repeat it again because it's the direction of the Maamar. It's important to know the trajectory, where we're heading. This discussion, which is of course a classic and a standard Kabbalistic discussion, is based on a pasuk in Parshas Mishpatim about Marakvei Davai, what Hashem looked like at Har Sinai. And the Alter Rebbe observed that in the psukim there it says two expressions, Yad and Regel, hand and foot. And as this Maamar develops, you will see the repeated allusions to Yad and Regel, and you will find that the whole purpose of this Maamar is to ultimately get to this conversation about Yad Havai and Regel Havai. But it's not yet necessary. I'm just mentioning it because it's very important to keep ourselves in tune to the big picture and the ultimate direction that we're going to get back to Yad and Regel of Adam Ha'elyon. So now we continue on line 64. And again, the issue now is to bring Atzilus to the lower worlds. Vehine, Pirush, Va'al Ve'inyan, Va'al Dumus HaKis. This Mara Adam, or Dumus Mara Adam, which we described in the previous section, which is describing Adam Ha'elyon, Atzilus, Ein Sof come down into Atzilus, is sitting on a chair. So the question now becomes, what's this chair? Now, Kabbalistically speaking, Olam HaBriya is called Olam HaKisei. The world of Briya is called the world of the Eibishter's throne, seat. That's only B'Klalos. And B'Prati is in every world is a Kisei. Adam would be Zah and Malchus would be Kisei. So the Rebbe answers and he says the following: in order to create the lower worlds, which are Briya, Tzir, and Nasi, and of course there's two aspects here. One aspect is to create the lower worlds. And the second aspect is, once the lower worlds are created, you have to bring Elokus down to sustain them. So you have two limitations. First of all, the lower worlds are measured and limited. Now Atzilus is also in a way measured and limited, because even though it's Ein Sof, it's Adam. But when it comes to Atzilus, we have something called Koyach HaGvul rather than Gvul Mamish and other such ideas. But the lower worlds are truly limited, and there's a great disparity between Koyach HaGvul and Gvul, unlimited or potentially limited and actually limited. But in addition, they're independent, which means klipa. So first of all, the lower worlds are limited, and second, the lower worlds are not exact. They're not just limited but precise copies of Adam Ha'elyon, they're limited and less than precise copies of Adam Ha'elyon. And therefore, you cannot create the lower worlds by simply bringing down light and life from Atzilus into the lower worlds. Why? Because the world of Atzilus is altogether bottle, and it's Ein Sof. Because of Atzilus, in Atzilus, the light and the vessels are one mamish. And therefore, if you would bring down the light of Atzilus into the lower worlds, they too would be Atzilus-like. And they would not be representative of the lower three worlds, neither in the sense that they're limited, nor, and more significantly, in the sense that they have in them klipam. And therefore, to go from Atzilus to Briya, Ella, the answer is why the yeshivas Adam Ha'elyon, that Atzilus, which is Adam, sits ala kisei, on a seat. For example, using a physical event of a person sitting on a chair, a seat on which a person sits, he has to lower his head down. Now, in many Maamar Chassidus, when they talk about the concept of sitting on a chair, they say two things. Like it says in the Maamar of Teirei and Breishis, the head has to go down and the legs are raised. Which, of course, in mystical terms means that the chayas of Elokus is diminished, and the feet are being raised means that it doesn't come down into the lower worlds at all. Here the Alter Rebbe brings the first idea of the head of the body sitting down, which means the godliness is being lowered, but not the second idea of the feet being raised. Rather, he's going to describe how the Raglei Yeris, the feet are going down to the lower world. So just like when a person sits on a seat, the higher part descends, and so forth. There's a concept of yeshiva. Elokei sits to have a relationship with the worlds. Pirush melech li'elam. Elokei sits in order to come into the level of being in relationship with the worlds as a melech. That the kingship of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the basis of the life of all the lower worlds, as it says in many places in Chassidishe, should descend to have a relationship lamata to the lower worlds. Let's have us to create the lower worlds. Which are the worlds which are limited and separate from Elokei. So Nikram Shachazu, this event of bringing Elokei from a higher level to a lower level is called Bechinas Yeshiva, sitting down. It's a lowering and a drawing down. What is the facilitator of this transition from Adam to the lower worlds? Hakisei. Because there's a seat which separates between Atzilus and Bria. And Kisei is two words, Case Aleph, covering over the letter Aleph. Translates the Alter Rebbe, Shu Bechinas Lavush, it's a garment, Lahalbish or Lahailim, to enclothe and hide. Ha'er v'achayas, the light and life, Hanimshech Bechinas Aleph, which comes from the Aleph, which is Alufish Alelim, the Abish, the master of the world, Lias Kel Mistater, that the godliness which comes to the lower world should be concealed, Kedei, to create, Sheyihiyah, to create this havas of worlds that are both limited, and of course, Hayesh v'dav nifet separate from Elokei. How does the seat accommodate this? So he explains, let's pursue further what happens when someone sits on a chair. Hine, Guf, yad of the torso, the arms and the head, they remain above the seat. Rak raglov hey mushpolim v'nimshachin l'mata, the feet dangle, they descend below the seat. What's the nimshal? There's an adam which sits on a chair, so the reish and the guf, the reish and the yadai remain above the kisei. The only part of the adam ha'eliyah which descends below the kisei is the raglayim. What's drawn below Atzilus to the lower worlds, is havas and Evrahim to create the lower worlds, is only by way of analogy, which is the feet of Elokei and Nikra. Only the feet of Atzilus come to the lower worlds. And remember again that in our Maamar, we're ultimately intent on discussing Yadayim and Raglayim. Notice that here we're separating Raglayim from Yadayim. Now here's the point. That when we speak about Atzilus coming into the lower world, there's a great tzimtzum. And that tzimtzum involves that the head and the body descend, but only the feet come into the lower worlds. But there's a number of different levels in this itself. There are the feet that create the worlds. They're the feet that give life to the world, and they're also the feet which have to do with the pnimius of the worlds. Our Maamar is going to be discussing Raglayim. But it's not going to be discussing Raglayim in its most peripheral sense. In other words, Tzimtzum as it relates to the external worlds. It's going to be discussing Raglayim as it relates to the Neshamas Yisroel as they come into the lower worlds. And as the Rebbe would often say at the end of a Sikha, Ukafi Sheyizbaya Lakaman, we'll discuss this in Mitzvah Hashem next week.